Hey guys, I wanted to thank you and the Texas Corruption Facebook page from the bottom of my heart for getting my message out there. It looks like the city is going to tear up my land, fundamentally alter it, going to put a concrete culvert in my side yard, and basically the reason for it is to put in a commercial development right up the street that they don't want people to know about. So, and it's also to demolish my perimeter fencing and things like that. And it's going to fundamentally alter the value of my home, and we'll have a cause of action there later. But it's really hard to get a fair trial, to get a fair shake in Waco courts. And the reason for that is Waco is the largest city in Texas. The largest city in Texas without a professional public defender's office. So these people, these judge, or as your moderator of the site pointed out, all these lawyers are scared to death of the judges. They don't want to offend anybody. They don't want to so vigorously defend someone like me because they could see that judge in a half an hour over a divorce case. And so they kind of pander to the judges, and the judges have ultimate power. You know, but the funny thing is, a lot of you have seen this letter that Governor Abbott wrote to me, or Governor Abbott's staff wrote to me. I used to be a legislative correspondent. That's what I was trained to do when I was in college. I went through a course called the Capitol Hill Staff Training Course, and I did an internship where I was a legislative correspondent for Senator Dole for a little while, so I know how these things usually play out. Most correspondence never gets seen by the person you're writing to. The legislative correspondent is told, hey, don't bother the senator, don't bother the governor with most of these things unless it's a name the governor wants to pander to, a big contributor's family, a name that's well known to the governor or something like that. So my guess is he never saw this. Maybe he did, probably he didn't. But in this letter, it says that I mentioned concerns about a state judge. And it goes on to say, let's see, where is it? We recognize that these circumstances must be distressing. Yeah, they're distressing. I've lived here 18 years and taken care of that property of mine. Put a sprinkler system in, which they told me they're just going to plow that up. Anyway, which must be resolved through the courts, over which our office has no authority. And I thought, oh, wait a minute. That's either your correspondent, your staff member has no knowledge of Texas government, or that's just a lie. What most Texans don't realize is that we have an elected judiciary. So, for one thing, it was intended to make the judges more accountable to the people. But what it does is, it makes that an elected office susceptible to special interests and ruling cliques in a community like Waco. My judge, in my case, came directly from interests that are vested in the destruction of my yard. The two people that want it the most, the city of Waco and Midway ISD. This judge has direct connections with them. And so he's not going to make them mad. And he knows that we're not going to turn out to vote. And if you look at your ballot come November, most judges run unopposed. So yeah, they're supposed to be elected, but most of them in Texas are appointed. And who appoints those judges? The governor. So the governor has a lot to say over state judges. Governor Abbott, you know, in this letter, I was really, and he also says in the letter, we have very little power over local matters, which is another load of bovine scatology, as I would say it. You know, what Texans don't understand is Texas is one of the biggest bloated bureaucracies in the country. Let me illustrate that. Texas has, this is at last count, 562,650 bureaucrats, public employees. Let me say that one more time. 562,000, I'm starting to sound like Joe Biden, aren't I? 562,650 employees. Over 500,000 public employees. You want to know how many Georgia has? I'm trying to find states that are kind of similar to us in demographics. Georgia has 217,000. Pennsylvania, an East Coast Democratic stronghold, right? With Philadelphia and Pittsburgh amongst our largest cities. Pennsylvania has 257,459 public employees. So the state of Texas has twice as many people involved in our lives as Georgia and Pennsylvania combined. So the governor of the state of Texas telling us, oh, I don't have anything to do with local matters. He appoints all these bureaucrats, all these people. And when I talk about the bureaucracy, I'm talking about outside the legislature, outside the courts, and outside the executive branch, which would be his office. Now, one of the offices that he appoints directly, and this doesn't have anything to do with my case, but I wanted to point this out. He appoints the insurance commissioner. So if you want to say thank you to somebody for our outrageous insurance rates, thank Greg. Send him a little note and say, Casey Hubble told me to thank you for the highest insurance rates in the country. What happens is, the insurance commissioner is supposed to watch out for us, supposed to monitor for abuses in the industry, right? What happens is the insurance companies contribute so much money to Greg Abbott's, or let's just say the governor's campaign war chest, that he appoints an industry-friendly insurance commissioner. And then to boot, it's the law that you buy the product, but we don't regulate the product. When have you ever seen that in a fair capitalist society? That sounds more like a Soviet mandate. You must have insurance, but they can charge you whatever they want, right? This place is, when you start to peel back the layers of the facade that is Texas, what you find is a very survival of the fittest state. And I am as Republican as you can get. But this hurts Republicans a lot. This state is not as Republican as you might think in its voter turnout. Just look at what's happening to Ted Cruz. If the Democrats can produce a fairly moderate candidate, it's trouble for statewide elections here. I can remember it wasn't that long ago when the legislature was 74-76, Republican and Democrat. And if it wouldn't have been for a crazy election in Irving, it would have been 75-75. Now, it's been a long time since it's been that close. It's been about 15 years, 15, 16 years. But this is a state that's more evenly split than you might think. So Greg Abbott's letter to me, saying how much veterans mean to the state of Texas, and I think it's just, it's disappointing. As one of the people on the Facebook page for the Texas Corruption Facebook page pointed out, it's patronizing, and it is. And I'll say it again, I didn't serve a day in the military for Greg Abbott. And he'll never have my support again. When I asked him for help, never. To me, he's a fake and a phony. And veterans can take that for what it's worth. But ask him for help, see what he does. He's going to come back with the same tired excuses that he gave me. Now, of course, I'm in Waco. And there's one other thing, there's one other thing I wanted to mention about Governor Abbott. In his first campaign for re-election, he ran against a woman named Wendy Davis. Some of you guys might remember this. And Wendy Davis was this liberal icon because she filibustered an abortion bill in the legislature. I don't know if you remember her or not. But she had this story of being in a trailer park and raising a kid by herself and all this stuff. And she was she came across really well. And so the Democrats made her into an icon and ran her against Greg Abbott, and he just creamed her. Well, one of the reasons he beat her so bad was because she talked about Greg Abbott's support for tort reform. Now, some of you out there don't know what tort reform is. Tort reform is basically, it's civil law reform. It's making it almost impossible to sue somebody in the state of Texas. And what Wendy Davis said was a valid point. She said Greg Abbott was injured by a falling tree, if I remember right. He was on his property and a construction company was cutting down some timber and he got crushed at the pelvis, right at the pelvis, by a falling tree. Now, feel free to correct me in the comments section if that's not exactly what happened, but the poor man was in a hospital for, gosh, I don't know how long. He was an invalid for a long time. And while they reconstructed what was left of his midsection. And of course it left him completely paralyzed from the waist down. And what he's been able to accomplish out in that wheelchair is absolutely remarkable. And I think everybody, Democrat and Republican, has a lot of sympathy for him. So Wendy Davis is talking about how he supported a law to make it hard to sue people in Texas after he benefited from suing someone in Texas to the tune of several $millions. But she did it by showing an empty wheelchair. And the narrator was talking about how Greg Abbott doesn't care about the people of Texas and things like that. And it just really backfired on her and just killed her campaign. But what she said is true. In Texas, we have tort reform. And you cannot, it is extremely difficult to sue somebody. So it's hard for the people of Texas to hold corporations accountable. And of course they refer to the McDonald's case and all that stuff. Does anybody know that woman in the McDonald's case had third-degree burns from that coffee? That McDonald's had done a study that showed that their coffee was 20 degrees hotter than anybody else's, and that the lids were flimsy, but it would be cheaper to pay out nuisance claims than it would be to make their coffee safer or to serve it a little cooler. That was that was found in discovery. That's not as frivolous a lawsuit as you might think it is, but it's always used to argue for tort reform because the corporations want it. This is a very corporate-friendly state. But it's not a state that's the haven that most people think it is. It has an extremely high poverty rate. One of the things I remember from lecturing about this in class is we're usually in the top 5, if not number 1 in teen pregnancy rates. We have so many people, we have more people living in poverty than most states do. Waco is a good example of that. Waco is one of the, to me, and given my experience, Waco is one of the meanest Darwinist communities I've ever been to. I mean, if you're not part of a clique in one of these little communities that comprise the greater Waco metropolitan area, your kids are treated differently, you're treated differently, and you better know your place. You know, this is a place that has two of the worst encounters in our history with law enforcement. the Branch Davidians, back in 1993, 82 people dead, no one ever held accountable. And did you know a jury in San Antonio acquitted the Davidians because they said the government used excessive force? You know, an interesting thing about the Davidians, though, I've lectured about them too. We had a sheriff back then. I won't say that now, but we had a sheriff back then that cared about this community. Sheriff Jack Harwell. Our jail, the one that I got to spend a couple nights in, courtesy of McLennan Community College Police Department. Our jail's named after Jack Harwell. Jack Harwell gave an interview in an Emmy-winning, well, I think one Emmy-winning, I think it won a documentary film award at the Cannes Film Festival, called The Rules of Engagement. And in that documentary, Jack Harwell is interviewed. And he looks like your typical Texas sheriff. He's got his Stetson on, and you know, he's in his office with the guns behind him and stuff like that. But Sheriff Harwell says, I was out there. It's paraphrasing, but almost a quote. He said, I was out there with the Davidians many, many times. I was out there with CPS. I was out there with different people. I visited that place. And he said, I knew most of the people that died in that raid. These are Jack Harwell's words. And he said, I liked them. They were good people. That's a direct quote from Jack Harwell. That's back when we had a sheriff that cared about everybody and wasn't afraid to care about people that most people in Waco didn't care for, and people that met a tragic end. He was willing to say, I liked them, and stuck up for them. That's almost, you can't find that in Waco today. And when I talk to you about the corruption here, the things that I've been through, and the people that I've asked for help, almost every layer of law enforcement, I've asked for help and to investigate this. And I've got a resounding brick wall in front of me. And all I've got for my efforts is retaliation. Now I'm about ready to lose my land. And yeah, it aggravates me and frustrates me. I mean, you know, like I told you before, I'm a veteran. I was in and out of the National Guard Reserves for 6 years after I served 4 years active duty. And came out of there with decorated, honorable discharges, did my time. And I'm completely and totally disabled. I will tell you one thing, I don't like talking about my health with anyone, it's private. But I will tell you one thing, I've been told that my life has been shortened because of chemicals I was exposed to at Fort Benning by 15 to 20 years probably. I have scarring in my bronchial tubes that I'll never recover from. That every doctor, whenever I change doctors, they think it's cancer, and I always have to tell them, no, it's just a big mass of scar tissue. That's what I live with. So when I say I'm frustrated, because all I ask for is for the city to leave, it must be maybe 500 square yards maybe of lawn that I've cared for, that's been in my family for 18 years, that my wife and I planted trees on, that we put a sprinkler system in and all that stuff when the local government here has looked at no other alternatives. Yeah, that's tough. And yeah, it makes me resentful. The city manager here is a guy named Bradley Ford, and Brad came out here one time when they were going to cut down my trees, and I was panicking, and he came down here. He said, we won't touch your trees. He said, we can do this around your trees. And now they're telling me that all the trees are going to go, and I'm looking at Brad and I'm going, Brad? Nothing. Brad doesn't remember that promise now. And it's just been a nightmare. So yeah, I have to sell my home. I have to sell my home to get away from this harassment and bullying, because Waco doesn't forget you if you stand up for anything. if you get out of place, if you don't know your place. And the Twin Peaks incident we had here, I don't know if most of you followed the Twin Peaks incident. 9 people died there. 9 bikers died there. And yeah, these guys, some of them were pretty rough around the edges. And yeah, it got out of control. But nobody has ever been held accountable for that. And law enforcement was involved. Was right in the middle of it all. And not one person held accountable for that. Not one person held accountable for what happened to the Davidians. My advice would be, when you look at Waco, come visit Magnolia and then be on your way. If you want to see the Chip and Joanna Gaines stuff. But I'm going to talk more about Waco. In fact, I've decided, since Waco's decided they're going to change my life fundamentally in so many ways we've talked about before, I'm going to dedicate my life to Waco and making people aware of what this place is like. So I've also heard from the Attorney General, and I wanted to mention that too. The Attorney General said there's nothing that he can do. The chief law enforcement officer in Texas cannot do anything about all the illegal things that have been done to me here in Waco. The chief law enforcement officer of the state of Texas can't do anything about the fact I was unlawfully arrested twice, that my tenure was, that I was robbed of my tenure and my job and my career, and the things that I still have to go through. The school district here that I fought a bond on, which was my big crime that made me a target for the ruling oligarchy here. The school district is going to benefit directly from what's happening to my yard, because there's no passage to the school right up the street from me. They've coveted my yard ever since they built that school up there, and have tried to get it. They've sent kids through there over and over again. And my neighbors and I had to build a fence you guys are familiar with. Well, he's directly involved in this action against my land too. So, man, be prepared. If you make Waco your home, if you want to make Waco your home, or if you want to relocate your business here, be prepared for how rough it is. And I'll be covering that some more as time goes on. I want to talk about some specific things that have happened to me, specific things that have happened to my family as we go on. But I want to thank you for sticking with me. And most of all, I want to thank the moderators of the Texas Corruption Facebook page, because they've got my message out and they've been very sympathetic. And without people like that, the story of the corruption in this state, the story about our lying governor and our lying attorney general, that stuff is not going to get out. And I'm telling you, I'm impressed by that page, because I taught government for 25 years. I taught Texas government especially. And the individual that runs this Texas Corruption Facebook page is spot on. So thank you. And thank you so much for listening to what I had to say. If you want to look up Jack Harwell's comments, it's under Waco, the Rules of Engagement, Jack Harwell interview. Anyway, thank you very much, and I'll talk to you again soon. And thank you again, Texas Corruption Facebook.